Today, we have a new face joining us because we've spent the last month chatting about learning difficulties when learning to read is hard, when learning to do maths is hard. And Lana is a homeschool mom with an OT background, and she's got some great insights into learning environments and how to pick up issues when your children are young. And so we're going to let Lana introduce herself, and then let's see where the conversation goes. So Lana, it's all yours.
Oh, Wendy, thanks for having me on. It's always exciting to collaborate, and it's an honor for me to invest in homeschool moms, because I'm one myself. I know what it costs to walk this path, and so I'm excited to be here. So I'm Lana. I have 3 children. My oldest have graduated high school, I think in the beginning of last year, and then I still have 2 young teens doing their thing. Is there anything I should add? I'm an OT. I used to work as an occupational therapist. I did a lot of working with learning disabilities and also just the precursing developmental delays, and also worked in spinal and neuro, rehab OT and psychiatry, but that's a lifetime ago, all of that.
Yeah, so look, for our purposes, it's for moms often second guess themselves. And I think one of the biggest issues is that moms tend to measure their kids according to an arbitrary standard. So because my child is in grade 1, they should be doing X, Y, and Z. Because they're in grade 2, they should be doing X, Y, and Z. And we've realized with our own children over the last 20 years is that kids have different timelines of development. But if there were an issue, something that was flagging, so maybe the child is now sort of 10 years of age and they're still switching their B's and D's, where does a parent go to from now? What could they have done perhaps as an early intervention just in their home without expensive OT and that sort of thing? So really just, give us everything that you got.
Okay, sure. It's actually a big topic and one that is exciting to me. I love learning environment because I saw in my private practice and in the schools I worked what a massive influence learning environment has. And often children present with a set of symptoms and difficulties, and then when you do the test and when you work with them and the family, it becomes so clear that most of that would have been alleviated by a different learning environment. So from young, there are certain things that is well supported by research and literature in your learning environment that you can do to really prevent a lot of difficulty later on. So maybe we can start there, and then we can move on to when the child is a bit older and there really does seem to be problems. Is that all right?
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so what's always interesting to me is that in the research around normal development, the phases of learning, what do children need, what shows up there when you study that body of material is a specific kind of learning environment, and that is the kind of learning environment prescribed to children with learning difficulties. So that's always just interesting to me, because actually all humans will flourish and thrive in that kind of space where we align with and honor the normal development. Okay, so in therapy, you just kind of hypercharge those principles, and you use that to support a child or catch them up. At home, when we have that knowledge, we can just make that part of how we live life every day, and that should sort out a lot of, it should be very preventative in your space. All of it is things that are easy to do for a mom, and a lot of it, as you will hear, is things that you actually do instinctively. And I think the punchline is to become confident that those things that is instinctive to you is actually, they are correct, they're spot on, and you need to walk with that confidently. So it's things like your young children shouldn't be sent off to do chores by themselves. They need to be under your wing. You need to have them work alongside you in your home, in your garden, so that you can have lots of discussions and so that you can model and mentor all of the things. In the first place, where do we start a task? How do we go through the steps and complete it? When is it finished? What are the attitudes that we bring when we work, when we play, when we're with others? They literally model off of what you show them. That is how young children learn. So the more time they can spend under your wing alongside you in a variety of situations as you live your life, and you are available to them for their questions and the discussions. It's a gentle way to parent, and it's a powerful way to strengthen your child's development in all of the different areas. So that's the one thing. And then the next is to make your space full and rich and delightful with a lot of language. So lots of reading again together so that you can clarify words, so that you can cuddle, so that your child can see. We read from left to right, and there are these things on the page that you can explicitly tell them from young. These are all pictures for sounds. Okay, so that they are aware from young that there are pictures attached to sounds. We call them letters, but that awareness and then practicing that the sounds we make, they are different and they look different on a page. That's the earliest intervention to prevent dyslexia from forming. That's the one thing, is lots of reading, and then also audiobooks. Never discount audiobooks. Having a story in the background while they are playing or building or drawing ups the quotient of language and just the context that story brings to our world. So that's also one that is spontaneous for most moms. We know it's good to read to our kids, and we can increase that by audiobooks. And then also, as much as what you are able to, as much free play as is possible. Okay, so I always say, you don't wake a baby that's sleeping, and you don't interrupt a child, not even for a snack, if they are playing. Okay, because play is the place where they charge their intrinsic motivation and strengths are coming to the fore, where they can challenge themselves, and they do. When you study free play, you see children pushing against their own boundaries, and they do that without force and without anyone telling them to. And that internal grit and determination and taking initiative are the things that we need to see. They need to bring that to their academic learning later on, when they are teens and beyond, not before that. But grit and perseverance, all those character traits that will help a child also with a learning disability to push through, all of that internal work happens with play. Actually, it's amazing. And you, the mom, can have a cup of tea and read something that fills your heart in that process as well. Okay, so those ingredients, doing things together, lots of reading in your environment, lots of free play, and then a fourth one is to have as many as possible hands-on learning, experiments, experiences, a wide variety of my hands are involved in this, because it develops the conceptual, mathematical thinking, critical thinking, problem solving. There's a whole lot that happens when your hands are involved, and when mom isn't so involved, that child doesn't get a chance to run into the problems or the issues with this thing and then figure out how to solve it. Okay, so this is true also for even older children, is to make as much of the learning practical. Okay, so a textbook isn't really your friend in this journey of creating a learning environment that will support learning difficulties, but that will bless any child. Okay, we need things to be tactile and practical, and so having lots of stuff available, recycle things and have a hammer and just things that they can construct with and work with. And then also they need the freedom to act on their ideas in your learning environment. Yes, so if we start too soon with bookwork, it's not, I don't know about you, I see a lot of curriculums and resources that has 5- and 6-year-olds writing the whole day. Everything has to have a worksheet or like something that you can show this is what the child learned. But that is not how children learn, actually. That kind of learning is only appropriate after puberty, actually. So before then, the modes through which children learn best in a way that make the learning available for later so that they can learn to read and write and so that they can push through if there are difficulties with that. All of that comes from that environment where they absorb a lot of things that we don't always register as this is valid learning. Am I still on track?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Shirley, I've got somebody cutting down a tree outside, so I'm going to actually mute myself and you just chat to Lana. Otherwise, our viewers are going to be confused.
It's so amazing just hearing you as an OT professional, just reiterating what Wendy and I have discovered ourselves and what we try to express to other parents all the time. And I'd like to just add a comment that I've also read that children learn best when they are in an emotionally safe place. So often in a school system, they're stressed or they're comparing themselves with their peers or they feel inadequate because of something they're not mastering. And that stress amplifies the so-called problem. And then mothers feel these children have got special needs and they take them out and they start home educating them. And then very often the mother's testimony is that the so-called problem just disappeared because they were now at home. But sometimes there is a real problem. And when would you say a parent needs to just get a more formal diagnosis to help them understand what they're dealing with? Because obviously little children must play and do all these lovely things, but when should a parent find out for sure if everything is okay, and if not, start dealing with it?
So I would say, of course, the background is probably the biggest indicator. So a few general things is birth history. If there was a difficult birth or maybe real health issues for the mom in pregnancy, that's always an indicator that you want to be aware of. So anything that could deprive the baby from oxygen before birth or in the process of birth, or also with accidents after birth, that's a biggie to just keep in mind. If that's part of your child's history, that might, in any case, that on its own might be enough for you to check from time to time, is the development on track? Okay, so that's the one big thing. And then a very obvious one that obviously it's easy to slip our attention is, can my child see and can they hear? Okay, so you do need to, any mom has to check eyesight and hearing, definitely. Okay, and maybe more than once. I have a child who I took for an eye test at 3, and everything tested normal as a 3-year-old should test, but then he was still not drawing, even he couldn't draw a circle or a triangle when he was 6. So we went back for an eye test because that's the first place to start. If you are not seeing what you feel you should be seeing, and I can't stress enough that you should find out what should you be seeing, because that's not what the school system or a conveyor belt system dictates. Okay, so there's a lot of information about the actual developmental norms. So that's good information to have for a mom. But testing eyes, so when I took my child back at 6 for an eye test, he had serious problems. Okay, there were allergy issues that made the cornea come loose and he couldn't see not far or near. So the treatment I gave and the glasses he got had him just like that, reading and knowing his shapes, sizes, colors, letter, everything in a span of 4 months. Okay, but if I didn't know to go back to that starting point, I would have thought there's definitely a learning problem developing, because who can't draw a circle at 6? Okay, a child who can't see should be your first. So instead of, I think we make much of learning difficulties and then we are anxious about it and we jump to conclusions. So test the hearing, test the eyes, and then another obvious thing is if there is a lot of history in your family around something like dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, if you know in the history of your family, there are things like that. That genetic link can be one to be aware of. Okay, so, and then a big one is the history of the child. What were their educational experiences? Were they kind of, you know, slotted into a very conveyor belted system where there are these arbitrary human-made benchmarks for what should you be doing at 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Normal development is so wide, and the norms are actually wide. So if your child experienced a lot of early learning experiences where they couldn't come to the task because they weren't developmentally ready, that might present as learning problems. Okay, because they literally learn from young that they can't do the things asked of them, and they internalize that. So if the history of the child is full of that and you see problems at 10, I wouldn't necessarily directly start with finding a pediatrician or a psychologist to make a diagnosis. Okay, a better place to start, and often cheaper, is to maybe just give that child time to heal, to gather some healing experiences around what can I do and where am I up to the task and what are my strengths, and then gently be just almost like healing, nurturing those places that got injured. I speak of a learning injury because that's literally what it is. And if you give enough healing experience, often those things that you see that are flags disappear. Like you said, Shirley, it's literally, if you change the environment and give the child time to breathe in there, then often that is enough. But if your child grew up with a healthy, developmentally appropriate learning space, and they still present by the age of 9 and 10 with certain things. I made a list and I can read you the list. You will also notice that the things that you will see there are things that you have then seen throughout their childhood. Okay, this is not, it's things that you can see from young if there's going to be problems, but you need to keep what you are seeing in context of normal development is asynchronous. Okay, so your child might not be able to discern rhyming words, but maybe it's just because their math brain is busy developing. All right, so if there's difficulty or just slowness in the child's ability to name colors and shapes and everyday objects, things that they are really familiar with, that can be a flag. If they have no interest in storytelling, they don't want to be telling you what they listen to in the audiobook or retell a story or something that happened in the day. Of course, that on its own is not a flag. Your child might just be not a verbal processor. Okay, so with all of these, you have to keep them in context before they make you jump up and take action. Okay, and then immature grammar is also a big one. So a child who is 6 or 7 still speaking really like a 3 or 4 year old is a flag. And then in terms of cognition, interestingly in the literature, the motor, the gross and fine motor development of a child is covered under cognition. So that's why literally the brains that you want to see work in their academics are developed by hands-on, gross motor, lots of play, lots of challenging themselves physically, and then also the fine motor, beading and fiddling with fine things, not necessarily writing. Okay, writing is a later fine motor skill that has a lot of gross motor support behind it. Okay, so writing, don't count writing as a fine motor skill. We are looking for fine finger dexterity. Okay, so if there's a lot of, what's the word now? If they are not dexterous like that, and their gross motor, they're always falling or bumping or very accident prone, and they tire very easily, the combination of that, the gross motor development is slow or clumsy, and then with it, fine motor activities are difficult. That is a flag. And then if they struggle to remember your everyday routines and activities and maybe the sequence for something. So I have to put the socks on before the shoes. If you continue to see difficulty with that kind of planning a task, the sequencing of it, and remembering what is it that we do every morning. So the rhythms and routines that should be familiar to them. Those are quite big flags. And then if there's difficulty understanding and retaining basic concepts, the shapes, quantities, is it bigger, is it smaller, is this color red or green or blue? Okay, so again, maybe that's just color blindness, which is not a problem, just something to maybe be aware of. But if that comes in context with the rest, then it can fill in the picture for you. Okay, and then something important also, I forgot to mention this one with the language and speech development. If your child struggles to find the rhyming sounds or discern between cat and hat, and they confuse normal words, that's part of normal basic vocabulary. So they can't find the word for, is it a chair or is it a carpet, but it's the pillow. That's a big flag. Then, yes, so again, that's in the context of what is the birth history and what is the educational history, should give you some pointers. And then shall we talk about who to go to?
Yes, I think, you know, a mom who's going to hear all of this and think, okay, well, maybe there is an issue. What do I do now? Because so many therapists know nothing about home education and actually biased against parents and think you can't help your child. You've got to have an expert. So what would you say?
I would say first and foremost, learn about how to create a learning environment that will support. If there really is a learning disability, I would definitely say that professional help needs to be part of your support system so that you don't make yourself crazy in the middle of the night, wondering, are you investing the right things in this child? Yes. So if there are mild learning difficulties, you'll be fine. It's going to cost you maybe some research and extra time with that child. But by the time you are talking about actual diagnosed learning disability, I wouldn't wish for you to shoulder that on your own. Okay, because there are very definitely very effective intervention strategies to genuinely help that child in that area. And what your child will need from you is to major on the things that they are excellent in. Yes. Okay, so it's also necessary to say therapy is not the be all and end all. It can be an important intervention, definitely, but that's not the whole story. And if you do decide to work with a therapist, you will have to educate her probably on just the difference between the norms of a school system and the norms of normal development, and you are wanting from her to support your child to show progress, okay? Because you function outside of that external, there has to be a sequence, stories. So, but I would say definitely therapists are trained to function within the schooling system. Okay, so I mean, that was hard for me to get rid of, to use the knowledge I have in the way it's actually appropriate, to see the knowledge for what it is, not adapt it to fit what has to happen in a school system. Okay, but if you are really worried, and if there are really are problems to the degree of we are diagnosing a disability, then I would say you do need, it would bless you and your child to have the support of therapists.
Yeah, I think the early intervention would help the furthering of the injury and the self-esteem issues that come when a child struggles. Yes. But I like what you said about parents helping their kids to understand what they are good at as well, because that also counterbalances that feeling of I'm not good at X, Y, Z. Yes. So and it's a
powerful asset that you have in your as a homeschool mom, and this is something to be confident about. If you are going to seek help from professionals, you need to show up with this thing pushing back against whatever opinions they might have about homeschooling. You have a powerful, powerful thing in your hand, which is called major on your child's strengths. Okay, and make much of that in your learning environment at home. There has to be things they learn and engage independent of help. And they need to fly and accelerate and experience that in the areas where they are able. And there will be amazing strengths. And it's important for the healing and for the progress of a child with a learning disability, for us to not hammer on the disability the whole time. The focus has to be on, well, what are you good at, and how are we going to really make fire under that and support that?
Yes.
And that's also, if you then add therapy for the challenge, it doesn't put all the focus on, oh, this thing that is hard for me to do. Then you are also strengthening that child to bring the passion that they experience when they are busy with something they're good at, and the grit that then develops because they keep doing the thing they're good at, and the perseverance that develops in that way. They can transfer that to bring that into learning this thing that is harder for me. And then also very powerful to remember is, if you can help your child be really engage in what captivates them, that will often provide the hook into them wanting to learn this thing. Maybe it's reading that is so hard for them.
Yes.
And if you've ever seen a child learn to walk, I mean, learning to walk is not easy. You don't come off unscathed. You get bumps and bruises. Sometimes you're bleeding, but children keep at it until they can do it.
Yes.
And that is the nature of that is what real learning does. When something is important to you, you will do whatever you need to do to get it done. And preferably we want to have some of that determination and passion brought into the thing they need to learn that's difficult. So that's also why we need to focus on strengths and areas of interest, so that they can discover there, oh, but this thing I love does require at some point of me to read or write some things down. So I'm going to do what I have to do because I want to do this thing over here that is important to me.
Yeah. So the character has to develop in order for those other skills to develop. Excellent.
Definitely.
Thanks, Lana. It was so interesting hearing your perspectives, and you really just reiterated so much of what we also love to share. So thank you for your time. And I don't know what happened to Wendy, but anyway, that's the beauty of live streaming. Hey. Anyway,
Yes.
thanks.
Thanks, Ellie.